Picture two retirements. Same company, same 30-year career, same starting salary of $52,000. Both employees enrolled in the 401k the day they were eligible. Both contributed every single paycheck without missing one. Both retired at 65, 6 months apart, from the same manufacturing plant outside Columbus. Both sat through the exact same benefits orientation on their first day, watched the same slideshow about matching contributions, and signed the same enrollment form without reading most of it. The first person retires with $340,000 in their account. It sounds like a lot until you realize it needs to last another 25 to 30 years. At a conservative 4% withdrawal rate, that's $13,600 a year, about $1,130 a month before taxes. Combined with Social Security, they're living on roughly $2,800 a month, in a country where the average retiree spends closer to $4,300. They took the default contribution rate the day they were hired and never touched it again. They picked the target date fund the plan suggested and never looked inside it. They assumed the number would work itself out, because that's what the paycheck deduction seemed to promise. They watched the balance grow every year and felt, reasonably, like things were on track. The second person retires with $1.1 million in the same type of account. Same employer match. Same 30 years. The difference isn't luck, and it isn't income, because they earned the exact same salary the entire time. This isn't a story about the 401k being a scam. It's a real, legitimate tool. But it was never designed to be a complete retirement strategy on its own, and the way most people use it quietly guarantees one of them falls into the first outcome instead of the second. I'm going to show you exactly why a 401k is not the safety net you think it is, walk through every mechanism that creates the gap, look at real examples, take apart the myths, and show you precisely what to do instead, starting with your very next paycheck. Here's the mechanism nobody explains clearly at orientation. A 401k is a container, not a strategy. It's a tax-advantaged box that holds whatever you put into it. The box itself does nothing. It doesn't optimize your contribution rate, rebalance your risk, or warn you about fees eating a third of your balance. It doesn't tell you about employer money left on the table or an old forgotten account. It just holds money. That design choice was built with good intentions. Automatic enrollment dramatically increased how many people save something instead of nothing. But it also created an illusion. People mistake automatic participation for automatic adequacy. Number 1, the default contribution rate trap. Most plans auto-enroll new employees at 3% of salary. That number wasn't chosen because it's enough. It was chosen because it's a rate few employees will object to. Financial planners generally point to 15% of income as a more realistic target. Someone who never raises their contribution above the 3% default is saving at roughly a fifth of what they'll actually need for their entire career. Number 2, leaving employer match money on the table. Anyone contributing below the match threshold is walking past free money every paycheck, money with no equivalent anywhere else in personal finance. On a $60,000 salary, failing to capture a full 3% match means leaving roughly $1,800 a year on the table. Compounded over 30 years, that single oversight can represent well over $150,000 in lost savings. Number 3, target date fund complacency. They're a fine default, but most people select one once at enrollment and never revisit whether the glide path, fee structure, or fund mix actually fits their situation. 2 target date funds with the same target year can carry meaningfully different expense ratios and risk profiles. Almost nobody compares them before clicking the default option on the enrollment portal. Number 4, fee drag that compounds silently for decades. A 1% fee difference over 30 years can turn a $500,000 portfolio into $380,000. A gap of over $100,000, consumed entirely by fees you likely never noticed. Most people can tell you what they pay for streaming subscriptions, because those bills demand attention. Almost nobody can tell you their 401k's expense ratio, because that cost is silent, buried in a prospectus nobody reads. Number 5, never rolling over old 401ks from previous employers. Someone who changes jobs 5 times can accumulate 3 or 4 orphaned accounts, each with its own outdated fund selection and fees. Number 6, the false sense of diversification inside a single account type. Someone can hold a 401k in one or two funds and believe they're diversified, with no meaningful exposure beyond U.S. large-cap stocks. Number 7, contribution limits that don't scale with actual need. Someone relying exclusively on 401k contributions is capping their savings at a number set by policy, not by their actual retirement math. Number 8, no Roth diversification. Traditional contributions are taxed on withdrawal. Roth is taxed today, tax-free later. Most people default entirely into traditional, missing a hedge against future tax uncertainty. Number 9, healthcare costs treated as an afterthought. Retirement calculators frequently underestimate healthcare spending, one of the largest and fastest growing expenses in retirement. Number 10, sequence of returns risk near retirement. A downturn in the first few years of withdrawals can permanently damage a portfolio's ability to recover, even with an identical long-term average return. Number 11, early withdrawal penalties that punish emergencies. Accessing funds before 59 and a half triggers income tax plus a 10% penalty, on top of losing decades of future compounding. Number 12, required minimum distributions that force withdrawals on the government's schedule. This can push someone into a higher tax bracket in their 70s and 80s, a problem entirely avoidable with earlier planning. Number 13, lifestyle creep eating the raise meant to fund higher contributions. Most people's contribution rate stays flat for years, even as salary climbs, quietly shrinking the percentage actually saved. Number 14, the assumption that one account type is enough tax diversification. Income drawn entirely from one source leaves far less flexibility to manage tax brackets year to year in retirement. Number 15, employer stock concentration risk. This ties both your paycheck and retirement savings to a single company's fortunes, a risk that becomes painfully visible when that employer runs into trouble. Number 16, vesting schedules that quietly reduce the effective match. Someone who changes jobs every 2 or 3 years can lose a meaningful percentage of matching money simply by never checking the vesting schedule. Number 17, no coordination with a spouse's account. Each partner manages their own 401k independently, often resulting in unintentional overconcentration nobody notices until the accounts are compared side by side. Number 18, ignoring the plan document entirely. The summary plan description explains exactly how the match works and what fees apply. Almost nobody reads it. Number 19, benchmarking against the balance instead of a target. A large, growing balance feels like reassurance, but it doesn't answer the questions that actually matter about withdrawal rate, taxes, or healthcare. Number 20, treating the enrollment decision as the only decision. The account exists, the deduction happens automatically, and the entire system is engineered to make that first decision feel like the only one required. Marcus is 45, an operations manager who contributed exactly the 4% his first employer auto-enrolled him at, and never thought about it again through 3 job changes and 2 promotions. At 45, running the numbers for the first time, he realized he was on pace for roughly $410,000 against an estimated need closer to $900,000, requiring an uncomfortable jump from 4% to 17% almost overnight. Diane is 52 and discovered 4 separate 401ks from 4 previous employers while consolidating before a mid-career transition, 2 she'd genuinely forgotten existed. One had over $40,000 in a fund with a 1.4% expense ratio, untouched since 2011. Consolidating into a lower-cost IRA stopped nearly $600 a year in fees without saving a single additional dollar. The Chen family, 38 and 40, had never compared their separate 401ks side by side. When they finally did, they discovered both accounts were invested almost identically, functionally one concentrated bet, not 2 diversified accounts. Myth 2. The target date fund handles everything automatically. It handles one variable, the stock-to-bond ratio, and nothing about contribution rate, Roth split, fees, or old accounts. Myth 3. I'll figure out the details closer to retirement. Sequence of returns risk and tax planning work far better managed years or decades before retirement, not compressed into the final stretch. Myth 4. A big number on the statement means I'm on track. On track requires a target to measure against. A balance without a target is just a number, not evidence of adequacy. Myth 5. My employer's plan wouldn't offer bad options. Employers must offer reasonable options, not optimal ones. A plan can be entirely compliant and still leave most decisions to employees who don't know decisions remain. Myth 6. Reviewing my account means checking the balance every few months. That tells you the number moved, not whether your rate, fees, or diversification are actually right. If you're in your 20s, time is the resource you have more of than anyone else. Capturing the full employer match should be non-negotiable from your very first paycheck. If you're in your 30s, this is often when the largest number of orphaned old 401ks get created through job changes. Every job change should trigger a checklist, capture the match, and decide deliberately about the account left behind. If you're in your 40s, the gap usually becomes mathematically visible for the first time. This is the decade to move past checking the balance and start checking it against an actual target. If you're in your 50s, sequence of returns risk stops being theoretical. Catch-up contributions become available, and this is the decade to run detailed healthcare cost projections rather than a generic rule of thumb. If you're already within a few years of retirement or retired, priority shifts from accumulation towards sequencing and tax management. The order you draw from different account types can meaningfully affect how much survives. Here's what actually separates the $1.1 million retiree from the $340,000 one. Raising the contribution rate with every raise, choosing lower fee funds, capturing the full match, rolling over old accounts, and checking in once a year. This week, log into your account and check 3 things: your contribution rate, whether it captures the full match, and your funds expense ratio. The whole exercise takes under 20 minutes. This month, if your rate is below 15%, increase it by 1 or 2 percentage points, and consider splitting new contributions between traditional and Roth if you've never used the Roth option. This quarter, track down every old 401k and decide deliberately whether to roll it over. If you have a spouse, sit down together and compare both accounts side by side. This year, calculate an actual target number with a fee-only planner if needed, including realistic healthcare estimates, and adjust your rate, account mix, and fund selection based on the gap, not the balance. The retiree who ends up at $1.1 million isn't smarter. They just stopped treating the 401k as something that ran itself and made a few specific adjustments instead of assuming it was handled. Go back to those 2 people, same company, same 30-year career, same starting salary. One retires with 1/3 of what they'll need. The other retires with genuine security. The paycheck deduction looked identical on both of their pay stubs every week for 3 decades. The outcome was never about how much either of them earned. It was about which one ever stopped to ask what was actually happening inside that account.